Admiral Kyung-ho walked slowly across the massive bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His boots clicked against the polished metal floor as he moved between rows of control stations. Each workstation hummed with advanced technology that could destroy entire worlds with a single command. The bridge stretched out like a cathedral of war, with towering view screens showing the darkness of space filled with his fleet. 300 warships floated in perfect formation around the flagship. Each vessel was longer than a human city block, bristling with weapons that could melt mountains. The sleek hulls reflected starlight like mirrors, creating a deadly constellation against the black void. Ion drives glowed blue at the rear of each ship, ready to propel them toward their next conquest. Kyung-ho stopped at the central command platform and activated his personal display. Holographic reports flickered to life around him, showing the military might of the Zephyrian Empire. For 3,000 years, his people had been the undisputed rulers of this galaxy. World after world had fallen before their advanced technology and superior firepower. The pattern was always the same. Arrive, demand surrender, collect tribute, move on. Admiral, called Commander Haijin from her navigation station. Her purple skin gleamed under the bridge lights as she manipulated complex star charts with her four-fingered hands. Long-range sensors have locked onto the target system. Third planet from a yellow star. Local designation appears to be Earth. Kyung-ho barely turned his head. Another primitive world to add to the Empire's collection. He had personally overseen 43 conquests in his career, and each one ended the same way. The natives would see his fleet, panic, and surrender within hours. Sometimes they tried to negotiate, sometimes they begged. None of them ever fought back in any meaningful way. The tactical display materialized above his command platform, showing a detailed scan of the human world. Kyung-ho's eyes swept over the information with practiced boredom. Chemical-based rockets that barely reached their own moon. Nuclear weapons that were laughably primitive compared to Zephyrian plasma cannons. Most amusing of all, the planet was divided into dozens of separate nations that seemed to spend more time fighting each other than preparing for external threats. Typical pre-contact civilization, muttered Science Officer Subin from her analysis station. They haven't even unified their own planet yet. Military technology is at least 500 years behind galactic standard. Kyung-ho allowed himself a small smile. These humans reminded him of the Carillions from the Vega system. Lots of noise and bluster, but they had surrendered the moment his ships appeared in their skies. The Carillions now served as miners in the asteroid belts, grateful to be allowed to exist under Zephyrian protection. Deploy the fleet in standard intimidation formation, Kyung-ho commanded. His voice carried easily across the silent bridge. Pattern Delta 7. I want those ships visible from every continent on their planet. The massive warships began to move with mechanical precision. Destroyers formed the outer ring, their weapon arrays glowing with contained energy. Cruisers took positions at cardinal points around the planet, each one capable of glassing an entire continent. At the center, the flagship Eternal Dominion positioned itself directly above Earth's largest population centers. Lieutenant Min-ho activated the communications array from his station near the rear of the bridge. Broadcasting surrender demand. On all frequencies, Admiral. Standard Imperial Protocol Omega. The message went out in dozens of languages, translated by advanced AI systems that had learned to communicate with hundreds of species. The demand was simple and had worked on every world the Empire had ever encountered. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation. You have 1 standard hour to comply. Around the bridge, crew members exchanged knowing looks and quiet chuckles. Communications Officer Tae-young had already prepared the standard acceptance protocols for when the humans inevitably begged for mercy. Weapons Officer Da-un was running final checks on the planetary bombardment systems, though everyone knew they wouldn't be needed. Kyung-ho walked to the main view screen and gazed down at the blue-green world turning slowly below them. It looked peaceful from orbit, with white clouds swirling over brown continents and deep blue oceans. He had seen hundreds of worlds like this one. In a few hours, it would be another jewel in the Empire's crown, its people working to serve Zephyrian interests. But as the minutes ticked by, something strange began happening on the sensor displays. Instead of the expected panic and confusion, the fragmented human nations were doing something unprecedented. Military bases across the planet burst into coordinated activity. Spaceports that had been launching simple cargo missions suddenly began deploying what looked like combat vessels. "Sir," Hyejin called out, her voice uncertain, "the humans appear to be mobilizing their military forces, all of them, at the same time." Kyung-ho frowned and moved closer to the tactical display. This wasn't how conquered species were supposed to behave. Where were the terrified surrender messages? Where were the diplomatic envoys begging for terms? Instead, the humans seemed to be preparing for war against an enemy that outclassed them in every possible way. Captain Junseo gripped the armrests of his command chair as alarms began wailing throughout his destroyer. The tactical screen in front of him flickered with hundreds of new contacts rising from Earth's surface like an angry swarm of insects. Each blip represented a human spacecraft, but these weren't the crude shuttles his intelligence reports had described. "Captain, we're detecting massive launch activity from every continent," reported sensor operator Young Mi, her voice tight with confusion. "They're launching everything they have, military fighters, cargo haulers, even civilian transports that have been hastily armed." Junseo leaned forward, studying the chaotic display. The human vessels were small compared to Zephyrian warships, but there were so many of them. They moved in tight formations, accelerating at dangerous speeds toward his fleet. Their approach vectors were all wrong according to standard galactic combat doctrine. No sane species would charge directly at superior firepower. "Sir, incoming transmission from the flagship," announced Communications Officer Hyrim. Admiral Kyung-ho's voice crackled through the bridge speakers, demanding updates from all ship commanders. Before Junseo could respond, his weapons officer Da-un shouted from her station, "Captain, the lead human vessels are on collision course with our outer perimeter ships. They're not slowing down or requesting permission to approach." The main view screen switched to an external camera feed showing the approaching human craft. The leading vessel was clearly a modified cargo ship, its hull bristling with crude weapons and what looked like hastily welded armor plating. Behind it came dozens more ships of various sizes and designs, all flying in perfect formation despite their obvious differences in construction. "Open a communication channel," Junseo ordered. "Warn them to maintain safe distance or face destruction." But before Hayrim could transmit the warning, something unprecedented happened. The lead human vessel suddenly accelerated to ramming speed, its engines glowing white-hot as they pushed beyond safe operational limits. The ship arrowed straight toward the Zephyrian cruiser, Dominion's Edge, which was part of the fleet's defensive screen. "They're going to ram the Dominion's Edge," Da-un gasped. "Captain Wu Jin is trying to evade, but that human ship is matching his maneuvers." Junseo watched in horrified fascination as the human cargo hauler closed the final distance. The Dominion's Edge fired its defensive weapons, tearing chunks from the human ship's hull, but the vessel kept coming. At the last second, Junseo realized what the humans had done. They had turned their cargo hauler into a massive guided missile. The collision was spectacular. The human ship, loaded with nuclear warheads, crashed directly into the cruiser's shield generator housing. For a brief moment, both vessels seemed frozen in space. Then the human warheads detonated in a chain reaction that overwhelmed the cruiser's defensive systems. The explosion created a miniature sun that outshone the local star for several seconds. When the brilliant light faded, both ships were gone. Where the Dominion's Edge had floated moments before, only expanding debris remained. The humans had traded one converted cargo ship for a full Zephyrian cruiser with 300 crew members. "Impossible," Admiral Kyung-ho's voice echoed across the fleet communication network. "No species fights to mutual destruction. They should be begging for mercy by now." But the humans weren't finished. More converted vessels accelerated toward the Zephyrian formation, each one following the same suicidal attack pattern. A human mining ship, packed with explosives, rammed into a destroyer's engine section. A passenger liner converted to carry. Antimatter charges crashed into a frigate's weapons array. Each impact resulted in the destruction of both vessels, but the humans seemed willing to accept those losses. Junseo's tactical officer, Lieutenant Sung Ho, looked up from his displays with wide eyes. "Captain, They're using the debris from these collisions as weapons. Look at this. The main screen showed human fighters weaving between the wreckage of destroyed ships, using pieces of twisted metal as improvised projectiles. They would grab chunks of debris with mechanical claws, accelerate to high speed, then release the metal fragments directly into the paths of Zephyrian vessels. The crude tactic was surprisingly effective against ships not designed to defend against such unconventional attacks. "Sir, multiple hull breaches on Deck 7, reported Damage Control. "Officer Minsu, a piece of human debris punched through our armor plating. But the most disturbing development was happening at the communication station. Lieutenant Yoon-ji was frantically working her translation equipment, her 4 hands moving across multiple control surfaces simultaneously. "Captain, I'm intercepting human communications," she announced. "They're not requesting terms or asking for mercy. They're coordinating their attacks using our own language." Junseo moved to her station and studied the scrolling text on her screens. The humans were indeed speaking broken Zephyrian, but their vocabulary was improving with each transmission. They were learning the language in real time during combat. "Listen to this," Yoon-ji said, playing back an intercepted message. A human voice spoke in heavily accented but understandable Zephyrian. "Blue Squadron, target the big ships with glowing engines. Red Squadron, ram the ones with many weapon ports." Another human transmission followed immediately. "Copy that command. We see their weak spots now. Sending coordinates to all attack groups." Junseo felt his confidence wavering. These weren't the desperate final gasps of a dying civilization. The humans were adapting, learning, and coordinating their attacks with military precision that shouldn't exist among primitives. They had turned their technological disadvantage into a tactical advantage by using methods no civilized species would consider. Engineering Chief Wu Jin stood in the damage control center of the flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing the battle's progression. What he saw defied everything he knew about warfare and technology. His forearms moved frantically across multiple control panels as he tried to process the impossible data streaming in from across the fleet. "Chief, you need to see this," called Technician Haiwon from her analysis station. Her voice carried a tremor of disbelief. "The humans are doing something that shouldn't be possible." Wu Jin moved to her workstation and examined the sensor readings. The data showed human vessels that had entered the battle with primitive chemical, rockets and basic metal hulls. But now those same ships were displaying energy signatures that matched Zephyrian technology. "Show me visual confirmation," Wu Jin demanded. The main display switched to a close-up view of a human fighter craft. The small vessel had clearly started as a basic atmospheric fighter, but now it sported a shimmering energy shield identical to those used by Zephyrian military ships. Bolted to its wings were weapon systems that fired the same blue particle beams as Imperial cruisers. "How long has that ship been modified?" Wu Jin asked. "According to our battle logs, it was destroyed and rebuilt using salvaged components in less than 2 hours, Haiwan replied. "The humans are literally cutting technology from our damaged ships and installing it on their own vessels during the middle of combat." Wu Jin activated his emergency communication link to the bridge. "Admiral Kyung-ho, we have a critical situation developing. The humans are reverse engineering our technology at impossible speeds." The Admiral's voice crackled back immediately. "Explain yourself, Chief. How are primitives adapting our systems?" "Sir, they're not just copying our technology. They're improving it. Look at this fighter squadron approaching Destroyer Thunder's Wrath." On the tactical display, 6 human fighters moved in a coordinated attack pattern. Each small craft now carried modified Zephyrian weapons that had been redesigned to draw more power from human energy cores. The fighters moved with a grace and speed that exceeded standard Imperial specifications. Science Officer Subin's voice joined the conversation from her laboratory deep within the flagship. "Admiral, I've been analyzing captured human specimens from disabled vessels. Their neural processing capabilities are extraordinary. They can visualize complex 3-dimensional engineering problems and solve them intuitively without computer." "Persistence. That's impossible," Admiral Kyung-ho responded. "No species develops that level of technical intuition without thousands of years of advancement." "Sir, the evidence is undeniable. Watch this human pilot's performance." The main view screen focused on a single human fighter engaging a Zephyrian destroyer. The small craft was piloted by a female human whose biometric readings displayed on a secondary screen. Her heart rate, brain activity, and stress hormones all spiked to levels that should have rendered her unconscious. But instead of collapsing, the human pilot executed a maneuver that violated the laws of physics as the Zephyrians understood them. She pulled her fighter into a 20-gravity turn that should have crushed her body into paste. The small craft spun like a dancer, using its momentum to slip behind the massive destroyer. "Her organs should have liquefied from that acceleration," whispered Medical Officer Ji-hoon from the ship's medical bay. "No known species can survive forces like that." The human pilot's fighter emerged from the impossible turn perfectly positioned behind the destroyer. Without hesitation, she fired precise shots from her salvaged Zephyrian weapons directly into the larger ship's engine housing. The destroyer, Thunder's Wrath, shuddered as its propulsion systems exploded in sequence. "She's not just surviving impossible maneuvers," observed tactical analyst Su Young. "She's using them strategically. That turn put her exactly where she needed to be to deliver maximum damage." Admiral Kyung-ho watched the engagement with growing unease. This wasn't random luck or desperate courage. The human pilot had calculated every aspect of that attack, including forces that should have killed her. She had turned her own biology into a weapon. Communications Officer Tae-young suddenly looked up from his console, his face pale with shock. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the human fleet. They're broadcasting on our encrypted military frequencies." "How did they break our encryption?" Kyung-ho demanded. "Unknown, sir, but the message is clear." Static filled the bridge speakers. Then a human voice spoke in rapidly improving Zephyrian. The accent was still thick, but the grammar was becoming more sophisticated with each word. "Attention, Zephyrian Fleet Commander. Your technology belongs to us now. Surrender immediately or we will show you what real fighting looks like." The message wasn't delivered with the panic or desperation Kyung-ho expected from a losing enemy. The human voice carried confidence, almost amusement. They were enjoying this battle. "Sir, multiple human squadrons are requesting individual duels with our ace pilots," reported Fighter Control Officer Dongmin. "They're challenging our best warriors to single combat." Admiral Kyung-ho felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his command console. The sensation was foreign and disturbing. Fear. For the first time in his military career, he was genuinely afraid of an enemy. These humans weren't just resisting conquest. They were turning the tide of battle using captured technology. Impossible, physical capabilities, and tactical innovations that rewrote the rules of space combat. They had gone from primitives to equals in a matter of hours, and they were clearly enjoying every moment of it. Marine Commander Hae-won stood in the security center of the flagship, watching multiple screens that displayed the unthinkable. Red. Emergency lights bathed his command post as alarm signals from 3 different capital ships screamed through the communication systems. His 6-fingered hands trembled as he processed reports that went against everything he knew about warfare. "Commander, we have confirmed human borders on the cruiser Stellar Dominance," reported Security Chief Min Jun from his monitoring station. "They somehow attached small craft to the hull and cut through our armor plating using crude plasma. Torches." Hae-won switched his main display to show the internal security feeds from the breached cruiser. The footage was nightmarish. Human warriors moved through the ship's corridors like unstoppable forces of nature. They wore simple space suits with basic life support systems, carrying weapons that looked primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. But they fought with a ferocity that defied all military logic. "How did they even reach our ships?" Hae-won demanded. "Our point defense system should have destroyed any boarding craft." "Sir, they used debris as cover," explained tactical analyst Kyung-min. "The humans strapped their boarding pods to chunks of destroyed ships and drifted right past our sensors. When they got close enough, they activated small thrusters and latched onto our hulls." The main screen showed a human boarding party advancing through a corridor on the cruiser. Void Crusher. The lead warrior was a female human carrying what appeared to be an ancient projectile weapon that fired metal slugs. Behind her came 5 more humans, each armed with different combinations of primitive and captured Zephyrian equipment. Sergeant So Young's voice crackled through the communication system from inside the Void Crusher. Her transmission was filled with static and the sound of weapon fire. "Commander, these humans are not normal. They're stronger than any species in our databases. I've seen one of them lift a blast door that requires mechanical assistance for our people. Deploy additional security teams to the affected areas," Hay-Wan ordered. "Use heavy weapons and coordinate your attacks." "Sir, we tried that," So Young replied, her voice tight with pain. "They adapt too quickly. The humans study our tactics during combat and counter them in real time, and they heal faster than anything I've ever seen." Hay-Wan watched the security feed as a human warrior took direct hits from multiple plasma rifles. The energy beams burned through his makeshift armor and scorched his flesh, wounds that would have killed most sentient species instantly. But the human kept fighting, returning fire with deadly accuracy, while his injuries somehow began healing. Before Hay-Wan's eyes. "Medical, explain what I'm seeing," Hay-Wan demanded. Chief Medical Officer Ji-Hoon's voice came through the speakers with barely controlled amazement. "Commander, human biology is unlike anything in our medical archives. Their cellular regeneration rate is approximately 10 times faster than standard galactic species. They can survive trauma that would be fatal to us and continue fighting at full capacity." On another screen, Hay-Wan watched a human female warrior approach a reinforced bulkhead that blocked her path to the bridge of the cruiser, Starpiercer. She was bleeding from multiple plasma burns across her torso, wounds that should have rendered her unconscious from shock and blood loss. Instead, the human examined the bulkhead for approximately 30 seconds, then placed her hands against the metal barrier. What happened next violated every understanding Hay-Wan had about the limits of biological strength. The human's muscles visibly swelled as she gripped the reinforced steel. Her face showed intense concentration, but no sign of the pain she must have been experiencing from her injuries. The bulkhead, designed to withstand direct hits from heavy weapons, began to buckle under the pressure of her bare hands. Metal groaned and twisted as she literally tore through the barrier. Within minutes, she had created an opening large enough to pass through. "That's impossible," whispered Engineering Officer Wusik from his station. "That bulkhead is rated to withstand 12 tons of pressure per square inch." Captain Young-Soo's panicked voice joined the communication network from the bridge of Starpiercer. "All units, the human has reached our command deck. She's moving toward the main computer core. Security teams are unable to stop her advance." The security camera showed the human warrior entering the cruiser's bridge. She moved with purpose, ignoring the Zephyrian officers who cowered behind their control stations. Her primitive projectile weapon dispatched the bridge security guards with deadly efficiency, each shot placed with surgical precision. Admiral Kyung-ho's voice cut through the chaos from the flagship's command center. "Commander Hay-Wan, what is the status of our marine divisions? Can we repel these borders?" Hay-Wan looked at his tactical displays, showing the locations of human boarding parties throughout the fleet. They had somehow coordinated simultaneous attacks on multiple ships, and each boarding team was advancing toward critical systems, with military precision that shouldn't exist among primitives. "Sir, requesting immediate reinforcements from High Command," Hay-Wan replied. "We need additional marine divisions and specialized anti-boarding equipment." Communications Officer Tae Young's voice carried a note of defeat that chilled everyone on the command frequency. "Admiral, High Command reports no reinforcements available. Command states that no previous conquest operation has ever required backup fleets or additional marine support." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had conquered world after world with standardized fleets and tactics. No species had ever forced them to request help. The Empire's military doctrine didn't even include procedures for reinforcing conquest operations because such reinforcement had never been necessary until they met the humans. Admiral Kyung-ho stood amid the wreckage of what had once been the most advanced bridge in the Zephyrian fleet. Smoke drifted from shattered control panels, while emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the command center. The flagship Eternal Dominion groaned and creaked around him, its mighty hull scarred by human weapons and barely holding together. Of the 300 warships that had entered Earth's system just hours ago, only 23 remained operational. The rest floated as twisted metal debris or had been completely vaporized by human counterattacks. The survivors were battered hulks, their crews dead or dying, their weapon systems offline. Navigation Officer Haye Jin limped to her station, her uniform torn and stained with purple blood. "Admiral, damage reports from the remaining ships are catastrophic. We've lost 92% of our combat effectiveness." Kyung-ho closed his eyes and felt the weight of 3,000 years of military tradition crushing down on him. No Zephyrian admiral had ever faced defeat like this. The Empire's war colleges didn't even teach retreat procedures, because retreat had never been necessary. "Sir, the humans are regrouping for another attack wave," reported sensor operator Young Mi from her partially destroyed workstation. "Their forces are moving into attack formation around our remaining ships." On the main view screen, Kyung-ho could see the human fleet assembling for what would surely be the final assault. But these weren't the same primitive vessels that had first launched from Earth's surface. The humans had transformed captured Zephyrian technology into weapons of devastating efficiency. Their crude fighters now carried energy shields that glowed with power, stolen from destroyed Imperial cruisers. Lieutenant Minho struggled to his feet beside a sparking communication console, his face pale with disbelief. "Admiral, what are your orders? Do we make a final stand?" Kyung-ho looked around his shattered bridge at the faces of his surviving crew. These warriors had followed him through dozens of successful conquests, but now they stared at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. They were waiting for him to perform a miracle that would somehow salvage victory from this disaster. But there would be no miracle. The humans had proven themselves superior in every aspect of warfare that mattered. They were stronger, more adaptable, and more ruthless than any enemy the Empire had ever faced. Continuing to fight would only result in the complete annihilation of his remaining forces. "Signal the retreat," Kyung-ho whispered, his voice barely audible above the sounds of his dying ship. Minho's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, did you say retreat?" The word felt foreign on Kyung-ho's tongue. In 3 millennia of expansion, no Zephyrian commander had ever spoken that word in combat. "You heard me correctly, Lieutenant. Signal general retreat to all surviving vessels. Set course for rendezvous point Gamma 7. Across the fleet, the surviving ship commanders received the impossible order in stunned silence. Captain Jun Seo, whose destroyer had somehow survived the human onslaught, stared at his communication display in disbelief. The word retreat didn't exist in standard Zephyrian military vocabulary. He had to look up the archaic term in his ship's historical database. As the battered remnants of the once mighty 12th Fleet prepared their jump drives for escape, a final human transmission reached them on the command frequency. The voice was unmistakably human, speaking in perfect Zephyrian with only the slightest accent. "Attention, Zephyrian forces. This is Commander Park Ji-Hai of the Earth Defense Coalition. We want to thank you for the excellent training exercise. Your technology has been very educational. Feel free to come back anytime you want another lesson in how real warriors fight." The tone was casual, almost friendly, as if the human commander was chatting with old friends rather than addressing the survivors of a devastating military defeat. There was no anger or hatred in her voice, just calm confidence and perhaps a hint of amusement. Kyung-ho felt his hands shake as he listened to the transmission. This human, who had just orchestrated the destruction of the Empire's most powerful fleet, was treating the victory like a routine training exercise. The casual dismissal was more humiliating than any angry threat could have been. "Jump drives are charging, Admiral," reported Engineering Chief Wu Jin from his emergency repair station. "We'll be ready to depart in 60 seconds. The surviving Zephyrian ships began to glow with the energy of their faster-than-light drives. One by one, they vanished from Earth's system in flashes of distorted space-time, carrying their wounded crews and impossible news back toward the Empire's core worlds. On Earth, the united human nations watched the alien fleet disappear with a mixture of relief and grim determination. In military command centers across the planet, human strategists and engineers were already studying captured Zephyrian technology, reverse engineering advanced weapons, and propulsion systems. Commander Park G. High stood in the primary defense coordination center, surrounded by displays showing the debris field that had once been an invasion fleet. "Begin salvage operations immediately," she ordered. "I want every piece of useful technology recovered and analyzed. Start production of improved defense platforms, using their shield generators and weapon systems." The humans knew this victory was just the beginning. Word of their resistance would spread throughout the galaxy, potentially bringing more powerful enemies to their doorstep. They had won their first interstellar war, but it certainly wouldn't be their last. 3 weeks later, in the crystal halls of the Zephyrian capital world, Emperor Vextar sat on his throne, reading Admiral Kyung-ho's official report. The document described the impossible defeat in clinical military language, but the implications were clear. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Zephyrian Empire had been forced to retreat from a primitive world. News of the defeat spread through the Empire's communication networks like wildfire. On 1,000 conquered worlds, subject, species whispered the name of the planet that had achieved the impossible: Earth, the world where humans lived, the species that had made the mighty Zephyrian Empire run away. And in the darkness between the stars, other galactic powers began to take notice of these remarkable humans who had rewritten the rules of interstellar warfare in a single day. The end.